Hi, I'm Nir Hindi, the founder of the Artian, a company that applies an art mindset in business environment to drive innovation and originality. Today, I'm going to speak with you about how art drives innovation and why we need Renaissance mindset. Why and what leaders can learn from TikTok, and why artists and entrepreneurs are twins.
Congratulations! You are tuned into Dov Baron's Leadership and Loyalty Show, the #1 podcast for Fortune 500 executives and those who are dedicated to creating a quantum leap in leadership. Your host, Dov Baron. He's an executive mentor to leaders like you, a contributing writer for Entrepreneur Magazine, CEO World, and he's been featured on CNN, Fox, CBS, and many other notable sites. Dov Baron is an international business speaker who was named by Inc. magazine as one of the top 100 leadership speakers to hire. Now, over to Dov Baron.
Welcome, dear friends, fans, and fellow aficionados of leadership excellence. Thank you for joining us on this episode of Leadership and Loyalty. What do you need to do to up-level your leadership? How about the idea that you need to think like an artist? Particularly if you don't consider yourself to be at all artistic. How might that make you a better leader? Well, stay tuned, because that's where we're going on today's show. I'm your host, Dov Baron. I'm here to assist you tapping into the one thing in your business that changes everything by transforming meaning into action. Curious to know more? Go to dovbaron.com. That's DOVBARON.com. This episode of Leadership and Loyalty is brought to you in part by our other podcast, Curiosity Bites. Curiosity Bites is the answer to the question, how do we bring together the people who most likely to disagree? This is exactly what your heart, your mind, your soul has been craving. It's your chance to sit in on some very real and often intense conversations with some of the world's most interesting people. I'm talking about astronauts, neuroscientists, neurosurgeons, philosophers, holy people, quantum physicists, skeptics, multi-Grammy award-winning entertainers. Some folks you might think you would completely disagree with, you'll find truly fascinating. Simply go to dovbaron.com, find out how you can sign up for and sink your teeth into the delicious Curiosity Bites. As always, you can find both of the shows on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, iHeartRadio, or wherever you tune into podcasts. And we always need your help to stay relevant. So please do us a favor, get over to wherever you tune into the podcast, rate, review, and subscribe to the show. If you are a regular listener, big thank you to you for making us the #1 podcast globally for Fortune 500 listeners. And we are honored and grateful to be cited by Inc.com as the #1 podcast to make you a better leader. You can also listen to us on Google Home or Alexa by simply saying, play Dov Baron podcast. All right. Thank you for sharing the show with everybody you know. Now let's strip it down and dive right in. In around the year 1300, those with big money began to realize the limits of their wealth. None less than the Medici family. Now, Medici family were the center of the world financially, and they financed arts in a rising new class of the wealthy. This was in many ways the birth of the Renaissance. Well, maybe, just maybe, we all need a Renaissance state of thinking about art in business today. If we adopted Renaissance thinking about art and about artists, how might that transform business, markets, and innovation? Well, that's what we're going to find out together, because our guest today is Nir Hindi. Now, he says creativity is a matter of commitment, not a matter of resources. Nir is originally from Tel-Aviv in Israel. You may be surprised to know that he's an entrepreneur who, though he's rooted in the world of technology and business, has always had one foot in the creative world. He is the founder of The Artisan, a trans-disciplinary training company that fuses and mixes art in business and technology environments to pursue originality. He is part of Headspring's training professionals, a Financial Times IIE Corporate Learning Alliance. He is a visiting professor at IE Business School and core faculty at the Master of Design and Innovation in IED He is a master in leading startup programs, including Endeavor's Startup-bootcamp, Arts at MIT, and others. The founder of Arts and Technology Event Series and part of Kotek's 100 experts to promote innovation in Spain, where he is based. Nir Hindi always operates at the intersection and execution of imagination and execution. Devoted to fostering Renaissance thinking in business, he is especially advocates the connection between artistic talent and business entrepreneurship, two areas that fuel each other and provide endless mutual learning and opportunity. So, ladies and gentlemen, please put your hands together and help me to welcome all the way from Madrid in Spain, the Israeli with the Japanese best-selling author of Renaissance thinking, Nir Hindi.
Thank
Good to have you, man.
Thank you. I mean, definitely my mom will be proud of from all this introduction. Like every
You only
Jewish
did it
mom.
to make your mom proud. That's it.
Yeah, I mean, that's it. I mean, you already bought my mom's world with that.
That's good. So we'll play it for her over on a loop, eh?
Yeah.
So Nir, I always like to start the conversation this way, and that is, in the context of leadership development, what is the question that we should be looking to answer that we're not? We're often just ignoring it. What is the leadership question that we should absolutely be looking to answer? What do you think that is?
Great question. For me, because leadership often is being perceived as political and maybe social and maybe in business, we tend to ignore what we can learn from art. And I think, at least from my perspective, what are the leadership lessons we can learn from the people that reflect on humanities, project humanities, and actually define humanities?
That's an interesting way to look at it. You and I had a conversation a while back. I was on your show and I was very grateful to be on there. So thank you for that. We talked about art, and as you know, as a child, I was an artist. That was my thing. And I've always seen art as this springboard. It's the voice of truth. The artists speak the truth in their forms, whatever those are, to politics, to business, to those things. And yet I still see that art is downgraded in its importance. Yeah. And I know that your work and what you're doing is about lifting that up. Talk to us more about that intersection, which I think is so undervalued.
Yeah. Listen, I mean, I always say that what I do today is basically the result of a frustrated kid. Because when I was a kid, I had this passion for the arts and the entrepreneurship. I had a passion for painting and I had passion for technology. But everyone told me, Nir, you have to choose. What are you, left brain or right brain? Yeah. And I think that, society channel us to choose without really understanding what we are doing to kids. So even though I chose the business entrepreneurial path, I started to get engaged with art in my 20s. And I started to see a lot of similarities between artists and entrepreneurs. Mm-hmm. And one day I read an article that in a way articulated what I felt. I felt that artists and entrepreneurs are the same or similar, but I didn't know how to put it in words. Mm. And then I read an article and the main message was that entrepreneurs are the artists of the business world. And that makes...
Hold on. Entrepreneurs are the artists of the business world. That's exactly. Very interesting there. I just want everybody to sort of note that for a minute. Yeah. Now go on, please.
So if I refer to that one, for me personally, Nir, for me, entrepreneurs and artists are much more similar than entrepreneurs and business professionals. That's my own humble opinion, and we can discuss it, obviously. And when I try to kind of understand why we separated out, I started to research it. And I think the biggest realization that I had about art is that art is not an object. We tend to think about art as a painting, as a book, as a song, as a movie, without actually understanding that this is the manifestation of a thinking process. This is the manifestation of a vision. This is the manifestation of a passion. And the moment you understand that art is not an object, but rather art is a mindset, it's a mentality, then you have a whole new path of exploration. And then you can see how it can be relevant to many aspects of life, from my personal point of view, for the realm of business.
So that, I mean, I love that. But again, I still think there's this biases, and you were just talking about it at the beginning there. We all have our own biases about all kinds of things. Art in many ways, and you mentioned how you were made to choose. It was seen as something like, when I was a kid, I was asked, what do you want to do? And I wanted to be an artist. It was like, 1 in 100 make it, and 1 in 100 of them make money, right? So it was like, forget about it. That bias that was, put on me by a career counselor. But in the research, what is, obviously you talked about mindset here, but what are the biggest misconceptions about artists, and why are they wrong? Why do you think they're wrong?
So as you said, I think, in many ways, though we are living in a culture that is toxic toward art, artists are being perceived as loners, as lazy, they're crazy. In order to be successful, you have to be crazy. We don't think about them working in collaboration. They are outsiders. And when you think about that, who would like his son or his daughter to be an artist? Right. Nobody. But it's so wrong. I mean, in many ways, artists thrive on collaboration. Picasso could have been a Picasso if he didn't have Braque with him. I mean, and reading the letters or the conversation between them, you understand how Braque was important for Picasso, or the concept that the Banda de Picasso, all his friends that, sitting around the table exchanging ideas. And in a way, you open our show speaking about the Medici. Think about the Medici codes. What was the Medici codes? It's bringing a philosopher and mathematician and engineers and sculptor and painters, and mixing people and ideas together. Now, unfortunately, all these misconceptions that you talked about are so ingrained into our society that it's very difficult to kind of break from them. Now, don't get me wrong. To be a successful artist is very, very, very difficult. That's why, by the way, I think we as a society, we need to cheer and rave about those people, because they are the percentage of the percentage that actually succeed. Basically, in business, you can just succeed by sitting on your chair. Don't get into corporate politics. Do your job and you will progress. But artists cannot succeed that way. They need to create, they need to build their way. And that's why I think, when we see someone successful, we need to appreciate them even more, because the effort that they did is like probably 10 times more, if not 100 times more. And by the way, that's why I truly believe that entrepreneurs and artists are very similar, because there is nothing logic about being an artist, and there is nothing logic about to become entrepreneur. All the chances are against you.
Yes.
I mean, we love the media story. Oh, Dov, you had an idea 1 year after you sold the company for 120 million for this and this company. But this is the success stories. How many people fall on the way there? So I think that if we talk about misconceptions in art, we need to speak about misconceptions in entrepreneurship, and to understand that it requires much more than thinking about someone as lazy, as someone that is a loner, etc. So
yeah, I think that, you said about being the outsider, when I think about Van Gogh, and I think about Goya, right? And, like you just mentioned, other artists who collaborated, there are many of those. We don't think, but we think of them as isolated. We don't think about Steve Jobs having a conversation with Bill, right? But they did. They worked together. They collaborated. Yes, they're very separate. we don't think about Goya and we don't think about Van Gogh. We don't think about these different artists who did collaborate and maybe fought too, but they collaborated. They even in the fighting, there was an expansion.
Exactly.
And I think that when we think of, there's the personification of the idea of genius is given to Einstein. But Einstein said, imagination is more important. Imagination is more important. So, he understood that. And it's interesting that I read this many, many years ago, and maybe you know about this. Especially this came up for me. I was fascinated by this because at the time, this whole left brain, right brain thing was very big, which we now know is not really true, but this whole idea. And so when Einstein died, he donated his brain. And so they examined his brain and they found it was about the same size as the other brains. It didn't appear to be particularly different. So they were like, this is fascinating. How did this guy, how does this lump of meat that has made Einstein, how come it's the same as a schmucko down the road? Like, what's the, why? And what they found was the corpus callosum, which is the section of the brain that joins the left and right, the bridge across those two sections was much thicker on his brain than it was on the average man's. In fact, his brain looked more like a woman's brain in that way, that he was allowed himself the creativity, allowed himself the eccentricities of being an artist. And that is part of the bias, is the eccentricities. I think that's part of the problem. But if you look at brilliant business people, we think of them as eccentric. We think of Steve Jobs as eccentric. He was. We think about, Ford as eccentric. They were. Kellogg, eccentric. All these, what does eccentric mean? It means I don't think the way other people think. Isn't that a definition of an artist? So I love that you're bringing these two things together, Nir, in a way that is not being done. I really do.
Thank you. I mean, it's. I think that you mentioned Einstein, and there is a very interesting research about Nobel Prize winners in science, and what they found in this research is that a Nobel Prize winner is 3 times more likely to actually do art. Apparently, they activate parts in the brain that allow them to, for example, hand-eye coordination when you do sculptures, etc., etc. So it's not. I think it's not a kind of a maybe that weird that we see people like Einstein or Feynman that actually were kind of found themselves in the intersection of art and science. And just to give, since I'm here in Madrid, Spain, one of the people I was discovering while I was doing my research on this intersection is Santiago Ramón y Cajal, that is I think the first Spanish Nobel Prize winner. And actually, he's the first one in the world to draw the nerve system, and he's considered the father of neuroscience. And Santiago Ramón y Cajal had great passion for drawing. He wanted to study art, and his father didn't allow him, and he used to kind of paint on doors, etc., etc. And when he got the opportunity, he actually applied his drawing skills into neuroscience, because if you think about it, until in the 19th century, you didn't have a map of the nerve system. And Santiago Ramón y Cajal, that was a painter and a drawer, actually gave us those drawings that today still being seen and used.
Like I said, I love that you are bringing this intersection together. And let me be clear. It's not that it wasn't there. It's always been there. But what I love that you're doing is you're tearing down the walls of the bias that say, no, this is in this world and this is in that world. And it's just not. Yeah. It's just not.
Well, right? At least I'm trying.
Well, But this is your commitment. This is your purpose.
Yeah.
This is what you're doing, and this is the I would go so far as to say this is the meaning of your life, is to
Yeah.
see this. So let's go into you for a little bit, because you were told you had to choose between the two.
Yeah.
As a kid, did you envision yourself as an artist? Is that what you saw yourself becoming?
Listen, that it was my dream. That's the thing, is that on a daily basis, my dream was to be a successful businessman. I didn't even know the word entrepreneur in the 80s in Israel. I didn't even know what that is, this type of word. So for me, it was businessman. Then I realized that entrepreneur is a different breed. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So for me, those dreams about becoming a entrepreneur and becoming a great architect or photographer or an artist was things that crossed my mind on a daily basis. So, I felt that I'm like, who am I? If all the society can choose, why I can't?
Mm-hmm.
And now I know that it's much more natural. The fact that we force our kids to choose, that is unnatural. That is not normal. We need to encourage both of them and let them choose. Why we all the time look up to Leonardo da Vinci, but still we're preventing from our kids to even try to explore this intersection.
Yeah, I mean, but the argument there would be that different time, Leonardo da Vinci, very different time.
I agree.
And the argument would also be that Da Vinci was an extraordinary genius. My kid, just likes to draw, right?
So even if he just wants to draw, let him draw or let her draw.
Yeah.
I mean, it's like, who knows that Santiago Ramon y Cajal will use his drawing skill to give us the nerve system mapping?
Yeah.
Most of the people don't even know about Santiago Ramon y Cajal.
No, and they certainly wouldn't know about him from the context of that art was there. Even if they know about him from a Nobel Prize, they probably don't know him from the point of art. They don't know Feynman from a point of art. They don't know the creativity often of even Einstein.
So let me give you another kind of maybe the opposite example.
Yes.
All of us know the Morse code, right?
Yes.
Samuel Morse, who invented the Morse code, who invented the first electric telegraph. Samuel Morse was a painter, and the whole idea for the electric telegraph that changed communication in the history came from his canvas stretcher. And with this canvas stretcher, he invented the electric telegraph. So here is another so-called Renaissance thinker that people don't even know. And if you go in the National Gallery, I think in Washington, you will see paintings by Samuel Morse, the painter, not the inventor.
Yeah, that's again these categories, right? We shove things in a category. I mean, so for instance, one of the things that I often will remind people of is that Da Vinci was a spectacular mathematician, and if you follow the golden ratio of mathematics, and you look at Rembrandt, you can see that he was a mathematician. There's mathematics in his art, right? It's like the positioning is mathematically perfect. The light balance is mathematically perfect. Like this, it seems like there is like you said, a downgrading of the art, a downgrading of the artist's thinking. And I think I told this story when I was on your show, and it's the biggest punch in my ego that I needed at that time, because I was an artist and I was kind of shamed for that because I was seen as flighty and all the rest of it as a kid. And then, I got into business and I had businesses and I got very interested in science and studying and all the things. I began to study psychologically and in physics and all those kinds of things. And then I had a business, and my business partner had a girlfriend who worked for us, and she annoyed the hell out of me every single day. I wanted to fire her because I thought she was dumber than a stick. Those were my words. Very rude, very insulting. But she, she couldn't make change out of $1. If it was something and 37 cents, she couldn't work out in her head how much change was. So it was like, God, this girl's crazy, right? It drove me crazy. And eventually things moved on. I moved on out of that business, and I was spending time with my friend. I came back to the city where they lived, and I was at his place, and she was there, and she opened the door. I didn't want to spend time with her because she was hard to talk to, because she was, I thought she was a bit thick. And I walked in, and they lived in the apartment I used to have. So they took it over after I left. And I walked in, so I'm familiar with this place. And I look in the living room wall, and there's an incredible mural. And I said, wow, that is beautiful. Who did that? And she said, I did. I'm like, what? She said, oh, yeah. Do you want to see another one? Yeah. We go into the bathroom. There's this Dali-esque type mural across the bathtub and a shower wrapping the room. I'm like, oh, my God, this is magnificent. I sit and I speak to her for 4 hours, and I suddenly realize I did to her what was done to me. I made her stupid because she was an artist, and I never considered that was her genius. Because she couldn't make change, I made her stupid. Mathematically, that wasn't her area, but her area was art. And I think this is the part of the biggest problem we have, is that we have got to pull back and say, what am I not seeing? What is the genius here? That is, as Einstein said, if we measure a fish by its ability to climb a tree, then we're all idiots, right? So it's that same thing. We've got to get past this bias. And I love that you're bringing up these examples where people can see that. If you were talking to a leader right now, running a business, maybe they have that bias against themselves. Maybe they think their art is stupid. Maybe they've got somebody in their team who is very creative, but they feel like they're kind of flaky. They've got those judgments on them. What would you say to a leader in that position who's feeling that way about themselves or about someone else?
It's a great question, because I wanted to respond to that just as you were speaking, because I think that when people ask me who understand it today, it's the young generation. Mm-hmm. The young generation see creativity as something that kind of inherited to what they are doing. That's why you see the rise of very creative platforms like TikTok and Snapchat that require doing things different in order to stand out. Though we can discuss about TikTok algorithm in a different conversation, but one of the things that interests me, Snapchat kind of obviously did their own research about their audience, and they try to understand who are those people that using their app. And one of the things that surprised me is that 80% of their users actually have offline artistic practice. They doodle, they draw, they write music, they play instrument, etc. And that surprised me, because that's a generation that grew up with the technology as part of their hands, but still they have 80% kind of doing offline. So for a leader that listen to us, I think it's, if you are from the old generation that think that the people need to do what you want, how you want them to become, I think you're playing the wrong game. Because in the past, people see job as a job. It's something that bring me salary so I can pay for what I really like to do. Mm-hmm. But today, I think people are looking more for impact, for meaning, for a purpose. And those are things that money cannot buy that easy, if at all. Okay, I'll say it that way. And I think that the young generation that change the work or jobs every 2-3 years, I believe that if you're able to tap into their creativity and tell them, you know what, we are an organization that will respect you, will listen to you, and value your ideas and creativity, I would assume you will see a better retention. So the first thing I will recommend every leader, don't try to make them you. That's why you brought them. You hire them because maybe they are different than you. Try to understand where you can actually amplify who they are. And you know why I'm saying this, Dov? Because I'm teaching in a executive program, and often I hear from the older generation in this program. They tell me, these kids are creative, zero in creativity. Every time I ask them to come with ideas, they don't bring anything. And then I ask you, what happened when they come with an idea that you don't like? Oh, that's BS. So I told him, why do you think they will come to you with really creative idea when you want the regular one?
Yeah.
So yeah. This is the first aspect, when it's you toward your employees. But then we can speak about, you use the word leaders, and often I see that in the business world we confuse between leadership and management.
Yes.
And I think that if someone that listening to us, the first question they need to ask themselves, am I a leader? Am I a manager? Am I managing people like processes, or am I giving people the ability to show who they are? And obviously we can discuss and dive into why I think leadership, it's something we can learn from art.
I think that's where we should go in part 2 of the show. We're already at the end of part 1. It's been a fabulous conversation already. And I really want to thank you for it, Nir. It's wonderful. As I said, we're here with our guest, Nir Hindi, the founder of The Artisan. And there's a lot of depth to go into here. There's a lot of things to unpack. And I really hope you'll come back with us for part 2. This delicious conversation. Before we do end part 1, I'm going to ask Nir to tell you a little bit about where you can find out more about him and his fabulous resources, including his amazing podcast.
So first of all, www.theartian.com, or you can reach me at nir@theartian.com. And you should come back to the second part, because I'm going to speak about how art drive leadership and innovation in business contexts.
Fantastic. So as I said, we will make sure we post all of those links in the show notes. So if you don't catch them, it's okay. They'll be there in the show notes. And remember, we'll be back in just one click. So stay curious, my friend. Stay curious as we come back with Nir Hindi. Stay curious, my friend. Stay curious.